Welcome everybody to another episode of The Ineffable Mystic. I am back here again with Ann Mei. So Ann Mei has a PhD in psychology and she's also a hypnotherapist. And we talked a lot about her journey in the previous episode about how she was an actor before and how she came to be studying psychology and hypnotherapy and other healing modalities and her personal journey basically. And it was such an enjoyable conversation. So many nuggets of wisdom were shared and channeled. And you can go back and see that episode before watching this episode. And in this episode, we'll be talking about our past lives. So this is also going to be an interesting one. So, Anne, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Ria. Be back here with you.
Yeah, same here, same here. Tell me about your past lives. Like, have you experienced your past lives in some way before?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got curious about it um, quite a while ago. I didn't grow up in a culture that, um, you know, uh, has that concept.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to see most of the research that's been done on it was done in India with children who remembered, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the doctor. Do you know who I'm talking about? Who did this past life research?
I think it was Dr. Ian Stevenson.
Stevenson.
Yeah,
That's
but
right.
I'm not sure if he did it in India.
Yeah,
So,
no, he did. So I read a book that he wrote a while back, and he detailed the research that he did, and he researched over 100 cases of children who claimed to remember their past lives and remembered their names, who they were married to, who they were related to, what village they lived in. And then he was able to go to those villages and see if what the children were saying was true. And they always were, which is just, I think that that's kind of incontrovertible evidence.
yeah.
So I was very convinced of it, and I was curious about my own past lives, but I never really had done anything with it. And then my son got interested and got bought a piece of Libyan desert glass, which I guess is an asteroid glass. Do you know about this?
No.
I don't know. My son is a very interesting human being, but has gotten in the past at least all these weird insights. So, and I love him, so I just kind of go along with it. So he's like, "Well, Mom, you hold the crystal in your hand and you go counterclockwise with it, and then you drop in where you want to drop in." So I was like, "Yeah, sure. What the heck? Let's do it." This is, by the way, not the way to do past life
Mhm.
research on yourself. Like it was the worst. Now that I'm trained to do it, I know this is the worst way to do it. But this was how I happened to start. So what I discovered was that as I started turning my hand, it got more and more difficult to move my hand. It was the weirdest thing. Like you're thinking you're just doing this, but it
Mm.
got like almost like really, really, really effortful to move my hand in that circle after like the first turn or two. And then I dropped in and I was immediately being asphyxiated. I couldn't breathe. And I just came right back out of it. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. That is not fun.
Well, that is very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So then my son suggested, well, go back to that same point in time, just go earlier and find out about the lifetime. So I did that. And I saw that I was a woman. It was like in the 14th century. I think I got the year like 1530 something. Like I asked what year it is and I got it, but I didn't record it. And I could see where I lived, and I was in a cottage with beams with herbs hanging down. And I asked, well, what do I do? And I said that I healed with herbs and with the laying on of hands, that I was a healer. And subsequently, I have, with past life regressions through hypnosis, I have gone back to that lifetime twice and gotten more details and relived that death and healed it. But I was burned at the stake as a witch
Hmm.
in that lifetime. And with my clients, I think we mentioned this last time, I found it seems to be not uncommon that the first place you go is your most traumatic death.
Yes.
And it, and that death usually is something that is really affecting your current life. So
Hmm.
to go into it, so what happened was the reason I went back, and it was like several years later, uh, when my son and I did that, I was in Japan with my husband, who was a diplomat. And several years later, we were getting divorced. And I had had this intuition that it was my husband in this lifetime who had accused me of being a witch in that lifetime. And
Mm.
when I went back and saw it, I saw very much the same feeling that I had in the marriage, where I was like, oh, but I love you so much. Why don't you love me? Why are you so angry with me? Why are you against me? It was the exact same feeling. I had that over and over again. It was a pattern in my marriage. So then when I was going to get divorced and we were negotiating pretty amicably, we'd had um, a mediation session, with a mediator instead of lawyers. And then we had agreed to everything. And then he had his lawyer write it up and send it to me. And it reflected nothing we had said. It was a
Mm.
completely unacceptable agreement. So I knew I was going to have to get a lawyer and I was going to have to, confront him because I had given up my job at the teaching at the University of Michigan in order to be overseas with him. I had a big gap in my work history.
Yeah.
I had no way of basically making a living. And so he was going to basically leave me with nothing. So um, I was going to go over to talk to a lawyer. And like, I'm not just, background. I tend to be pretty bold and fearless. And, I travel around the world by myself and I don't get scared. I don't have anxiety attacks. But I was going to go to this lawyer and my whole body just started shaking.
Mm.
And I knew that it had to be connected to that past life. And luckily, I was doing my past life training that weekend. This was, I think, a Thursday. And on Friday, I was going down to do it. And so I had several sessions where I was able to work on that lifetime. And then after that, I was able to, negotiate and work with lawyers and do it all. And I never had that terror again. So I realized that it really was connected to that terror that I was going to be burned at the stake again this time, which
Yeah,
obviously I wasn't.
it's so interesting that, when we are going for these trainings or past life regression sessions, so all these different past lives that want to come forward will be coming forward in that time period, in the same time period. So that's what happened with me too. Like when I got trained in past life regression therapy, I got trained in December 2017.
Yeah.
And I started seeing my past lives in June, July 2017.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that they were past lives. So I just thought that they were just stories because I'm also a very natural writer. So I thought that these are just stories I'm getting to
Uh,
write.
you just started getting all the detailed information. And,
Yeah.
oh, this is a great idea for a story.
Yeah. And those stories, I actually wrote them. And I didn't post them like in a proper blog or anything. I just posted them in my Instagram captions. And at that time, Instagram was different.
Yeah.
People actually read your captions, actually saw your posts, and I had a very like loyal following. And it was a really like a big hit with them. They were like, "No, we want more of this
Wow.
story." Yeah, and I was also getting the story from like different angles. So if there are five people in the story, then I was able to see those stories from each different angle and
Interesting.
yeah, feel all their emotions. So that was interesting as well. And that's the time when it hit me that okay, what if these are not stories, these are past lives, because of how detailed they were and how vivid those images were. So that's when I started Googling and I found out about this institute that was in the same city that I was in. And it was like renowned in India. It was properly licensed. So I was like, yes, I need to go for this.
Yeah.
I applied and at first I didn't get accepted because at that time I didn't have the proper spiritual understanding. But just 6 months later, when I applied again, by that time I had downloaded so much of that spiritual information that I was able to give the answers that they wanted to hear, right? And then I was accepted, and I was accepted among like 500 people. 15 people were accepted, so I was like meant to be there, right?
Yeah.
And once I was in the training, the past lives that again came up were the same ones that I saw before during my, in my dreams, and
Yeah.
all the stories that were coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the difference was that I was just feeling those emotions more in my body this
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
during the
Yeah.
sessions.
Yeah.
So
And
I
to
was
me,
releasing them.
that's the hallmark of the past life regression information is that it's
Yeah.
very emotional, it really hits you. It's almost like the whole idea just is all of a sudden you're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also had that burning moment. So I
Okay.
always have had asthma, and I
Mm.
thought that it's genetic because my father also had COPD for no reason at all
Yeah.
his life. And I thought that it's genetic, and also like the environment where we lived wasn't very good. It was polluted.
Yeah.
So I thought that it's because of that. But as soon as I went into that past life regression during my training, the first thing that happened was like I felt like an energy come near me and then embody me. And then I was just laying down, and I got up coughing, and I just couldn't breathe, and I had to really cough it out. And then I felt like I was in a fire, and I started sweating like anything. So yeah, I didn't get why I was in that fire or why I was feeling asphyxiated or whatever. But
Mm.
I did feel that yes, at some point of time, everyone in healing field who has a problem coming forward with their abilities, they have been punished in some way. So whether it's burning at stake for just being yourself. In
Yeah.
older times, like women were burned just for like reading a book or something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's very common with people I've worked with. Living
Hmm.
in Sedona, I worked with a lot of people who were healers, and almost everyone has had that experience.
Yeah.
And but now is a lifetime where it's safe to come forward.
Yeah, I always say that in my content as well. Like, so many of the clients that I work with have this problem that they think that they are not capable, or they don't have the ability to actually serve people, even though they know it at the back of their mind.
Yeah.
But like there's this imposter syndrome. So it's only because they're not feeling safe. But
Yeah.
now is the safest time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice. Yeah. More and more people are able to, I mean, for most of my life, I've kept quiet about things because, being a professional and you're not supposed to talk like this. And I even had an out of body experience when I was younger that I shared with one of my classmates in graduate school. And he said, don't tell anybody else this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was this in the psychology school?
Yeah.
But I think that these things should be discussed more, like if you're in a psychology
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
was so I went to graduate school in the late 80s,
Hmm.
and it was a different time.
Yeah, it was. And here again, I remember Dr. Brian Weiss because he is a veteran, you can say, in this field.
Yeah.
And he was in a time where even if you are seeing all these clients in your practice who are going into their past lives, you could not discuss it with other professionals. And
Yeah.
he held on to that information for 10 years before publishing it.
Yeah.
Before, like one day saying, I don't care. Even if they think
Yeah.
anything about me, I don't care. I'm just going to publish it because it's the truth. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very brave of him. Yeah. I mean, from this is the first time I'm sort of talking about, except for the last conversation we had, but really get talking about the past life stuff. It's the first time I'm
Mhm.
really sharing any details about my past life experiences with anyone publicly. And yeah, and it's partly because I don't want to be hiding about this stuff
Mhm.
anymore,
Yeah,
but it's taking a little bit of courage on my part. It's feeling,
definitely. Yeah.
you know, a little, I don't know, I'm a little nervous about it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But I
very
wanted to
natural.
do it for that reason.
Mhm.
I think where you're afraid, this is something that I, definitely counsel my clients too. It's like where you are afraid, that's where you move forward, right?
Yes, yes.
Just go into the places where you're uncomfortable. That's where your growth is going to happen.
Yeah, that's actually a great advice in life in general as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've had those instances as well. Like I was afraid to do something. So I have this huge, sometimes I have this like huge social anxiety where I don't want to answer phone calls or anything. But
Mm.
then I'm like, I have seen that if I answer them, then something good comes out of them, you know? So just go ahead and pick it up, and that's it.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's what happens is when you move into your fears, then things start transforming and changing. And yeah, good things
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, for me as well, for coming out with my past lives,
Yeah.
like immediately when I learned past life regression therapy, my life was thrown into a huge chaos. So I didn't have the time to even practice or even do anything with that knowledge and experience. And the people around me in my family, they used this information that I'm learning past life regression therapy against me. You know, they said that she's gone crazy. So that's why she's doing all the other stuff that she's doing.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, they didn't understand what it is, even though I explained them.
Yeah.
So it took some time for them to see that, okay, you know, this is normal. There are so many people doing this. It's
Yeah.
therapeutic.
Even in
And
your family, I'm surprised that
yeah,
Indian culture, it's more accepted, isn't it?
yeah, it is. But my family
Not in
is
your
more,
family.
yeah, my family is like full of doctors, scientists, engineers. So even though they are religious, they are like God-fearing and they do their praying every day and all of that. They, what I see in society in general is that people talk about things theoretically, but when it comes to practicing those things and applying or facing those things in reality, then they just turn the other way. They say, no, I don't believe in this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they keep it separate
yeah,
from sort of real life. It's just this little encapsulated part of their life. Yeah.
yeah,
And if you really believe, then it has to infuse every single aspect of your life.
yeah. So
Yeah.
for me as well, it was a whole journey to believe. Initially, I didn't believe it, but then started having my own experiences. Only then I was able to, you know, start exploring it. And when I met all these people who were also doing it, who also had their own experiences, and ultimately, you know, even if those are just our imagination or whatever, if you're
Right.
seeing the healing, if you're seeing changes, physical changes in your life, then that's a proof that somewhere it is working.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, Carl Jung, who also was sort of skirting this, he was investigating a lot of these ideas, but also was, you know, a respected scientist. So he had, but what he used to say was that there's a psychological reality to it. We don't have to question the reality because there's definitely a psychological reality, and that's good enough. You know,
Yes, yes.
I I personally am convinced of the reality of it, but I also think that there are a lot of aspects of it that are kind of beyond our comprehension. You know,
Yeah, definitely.
understand how it really works, I think is beyond our minds when we're embodied.
Yeah, we can try our best to understand, but again, there are some limitations that have been placed intentionally by the universe so that we don't understand everything. Otherwise, you know, human mind is such that we can use that information for bad as well.
Oh,
So,
that's an
yeah,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and I believe that even if we can prove one reincarnation case, I think that's good enough to say that yes, it exists,
Yeah.
and we already have so much of proof.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened with me, but some of my colleagues have, certain clients who had gone back and searched historical records and they did find the exact person and
Oh,
their
yeah.
exact life. So yeah, it's good
That's
enough
amazing.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't had that. Well, yeah. So I've had a lot of, yeah. But let me tell you the story about, finish with the story about my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was very interesting. There was sort of a bigger learning lesson for me in that, in going back to that past life, and in having the relationship in this lifetime. So when I went back and I saw our relationship in the one where the lifetime where I had been burned as a witch, I saw that when we were young, when we were about 14, I saw the scene of us being together we were by the river and we were sort of pretending to be fishing. We had fishing poles stuck into the ground and we
Mm-hmm.
were just cavorting. we were just like leaping with joy in the sunshine and kind of chasing each other around and just having this like the most joyous experience. And what I realized I had done in that moment was made this error, fundamental error, of thinking that the source of love came from him. And the truth is, of course, that only love is real. The source of love comes from God, and it's everywhere, and it's unlimited, and it's always available to us. But in that moment, I contracted and thought that it just came from him. And then I subsequently saw my most previous lifetime before this one, we were married also. And when he died, even though we had children, I just kind of turned away from them. And I just had the same feeling that I had at the end of that lifetime when I was being burnt, and also in my marriage, of like I had never really gotten connected to him in the way that I wanted to. And I was just always longing for it. And when he died, I just couldn't even go on. And I think that I died soon after that. But I just had this feeling of, I don't want to be consoled. I just want to die also. Like, if I don't have his love, then I don't have anything, which is a terrible, terrible place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I saw in this lifetime, current lifetime, is, I kind of came back to let him go graciously, to remember the truth that, and I'm very proud of myself, because when he first asked me for the divorce, the only thing I said to him, he called me on the phone and asked me for a divorce. And I said, I just want you to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it was very painful for me, I also realized that, other people are not the source of love. Self-love is really the key to everything. Just that recognition that love is available to you. It sounds simple. It's a simple concept. It's difficult. A lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah, because most of us are like bound within the boundaries of our identity, our egos. So we identify as this person, and there's like a separation between me and the other person. So that's why we think that, this is, if someone is gone, then it's, completely gone. It's not the truth. That's not it.
Right, right. But the truth is that we're all always connected, and
Yeah.
it's not possible to be alone.
Yeah, it's so wonderful because my husband just said said this exact thing just yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah, and we were talking about like
that's
I
wonderful.
always have this thought of death. I don't know why. I always have the thought of this, that if I leave early, like I want to leave early. I don't want to face that kind of a reality, to
Yeah,
lose someone that I love so much. And he says, I'm completely fine with that, because he says that I know you're always going to be there for me. Like, we're always going to meet again. I'm fine with that, he said.
aw. That's wonderful that he has that faith.
Yeah. So, any other past lives have you seen?
Well, my other big past life story is my past life that I had at the time of Jesus.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of healing that needed to be done around that lifetime too, I think. Um, and it's very interesting because we are now in between 2024 and 2026 is exactly 2000 years after the events happened.
Hmm.
They, they know now that we recalculated the beginning of when I call him Yeshua, so how he said his name back then. When he was born, we started the calendar in the wrong place compared to when he was actually born. So we're about 26 years, 24 to 26 years off. So in fact, we're coming up on the 2000-year anniversary of those events. And I found that, I don't know, at least I've encountered a number of people who had lifetimes then who are remembering them and coming together and finding each other.
I was going to mention the same thing actually, because the teacher who taught me past life regression therapy, he was also at the time of Jesus. Like, he has a big past life recollection of that event, the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And again, in his circle, there are a few people who were also there. So
Yeah.
then again, I had another spiritual teacher who was also there. So now it's you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's, yeah, like I said in the last one, there's different lineages. I don't privilege the Christian lineage as one that you know, is any more central or important to the truth. But it's one, and it's the one that I seem to have come from. So what happened with that, the story of how those pieces got unlocked for that story is really interesting to me. But I did do a past life regression where I was able to look at that lifetime. And I saw that I was one of the apostles. The reason I got interested in doing that was because um, there was this there's this person JM who channels Yeshua with these wonderful materials called the Way of Mastery, which I really love. Um, I have to always put the caveat that the channeler himself is not a very well person. So he's not someone who really who can be trusted personally. But when he channels, it's the material that comes through him is amazing. But he had come and taught for a weekend in Sedona, and at the end of it, there was an evening where it was just sort of a social evening, and he started talking to a group of us, and he started telling his story of being called to go to Jerusalem, him remembering his lifetime there in a very interesting way. But as he was telling the story, he at one point he stopped and he said, I don't know why I'm telling this story. And I was thinking, I know why you're telling the story. Because as soon as he started talking about it, I got so activated. I was just like vibrating. I was just like kind of freaking out.
Mhm.
And so I had done the regression where I saw myself meeting Yeshua. I saw that I was Simon. I was a big, strong man. One of the apostles is known now as Simon the Zealot. The Zealots were the people who were looking for a leader to come and overthrow the Roman occupation. Some people, myself included, thought that when Yeshua came along, he was going to be that leader who was going to help us fight against the Romans and expel them. And that's what I wanted to do when I met him. I saw him just come to me and put his hand on my heart. And he said, my friend, there is another way. And I just felt this sense of peace come over me. It was so beautiful. And then I became a follower of his and gave up this idea of
Mm.
to fight against the Romans. So that was so interesting. But then when he was crucified, of course, it was really, really traumatic. And I actually have a transcript of that past life regression. But I was just like, I knew it was really dangerous, but I felt compelled to go and see him on the cross. And when I got there, I just kept saying, there's so much blood. There's so much blood. There's so much blood. And I was so devastated.
Mm.
And when, and then I read this book called The Case for Christ, which looks at the historical facts that we know to say whether or not any of this really happened. And one of the things he depicts in there is what the crucifixion was actually like. And it turns out that often the way people died was by bleeding to death because they were flogged first. And he flogged so much that, his back would have been all opened up and the blood would have just been
Mm.
flowing. That was not anything I ever knew before I did that past life regression. That wasn't information I went into there with. And yet then I saw that, and then it
Mm.
was confirmed later. So that was very interesting to me. And then I saw my death in that lifetime where I was stoned to death. And it was very interesting because I just wasn't really afraid. I was able to just surrender and leave the body very quickly so that I didn't really suffer. And I felt like I really knew that I had learned something in that lifetime that helped prepare me for that death. I had been I probably don't have to go into the details of it, but it was interesting. It's not that but yeah, I had been traveling away from where I had been staying, and I was staying with this couple, and they were very frightened, and so I just let the crowd take me out and then stone me. But So I had that information, and then um, I got I went to this gathering of Way of Mastery students in England, maybe like a year within a year, or maybe a year later. So it was really interesting because I hadn't planned on doing. I'd sort of found out about JM, and I wasn't really interested in spending more time with him. And I was with a friend, and she was going to give me, I have my phone here. She was going to give me a phone number of a mutual friend. We had dinner out, and she pulls out her phone and she just taps it like that. And we see in really big letters this announcement of this gathering in England. And she just looked at it and said, I don't know how that got there. Like, I don't know why that's there. And I thought, I think I know why it's there. I think it's a message for me. And I kind of checked in and was told I really should go to this. And it turned out to be a pretty monumental time. Um, so when I had done a workshop with Jam for a week earlier that year. And I remember asking him, saying to him, because we were talking again about, the different people who have come forward from that lifetime about his experiences there. And I said, I said, is the person who was Judas incarnated now? And he said, yes. I said, do you know who it is? He said, yes, I've met them. And I said, that must be so, so difficult, because we know now that from his channelings, what he says is that Yeshua was coming in to say, he's the project of the crucifixion, not for the forgiveness of our sins, but he wanted to prove that death wasn't real.
Mm.
He wanted to physically die and come back and communicate with people to show that it's not real, that it doesn't end when we die, which of course we know from all these reincarnation experiences.
Yeah.
But which is a beautiful project, and his idea was to keep in that state of the Christ mind. The Christ mind is knowing that you're always one with God and that only love is real, knowing that even when really terrible things are happening to you, right? That you can stay in that place.
Mhm.
So that was what he came to do. So I thought, well, if that's true, then Judas couldn't have betrayed him because it was all part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
But Judas has been this reviled figure for 2,000 years. And I just thought that poor soul must be so difficult. And I just had so much empathy for that soul. So when I got to the gathering in England, it was really crazy. There were a lot of negative energies flying around that had been I had been starting to work with. I want to say negative energies, because a lot of them were coming up. They were coming up through my clients
Mm.
during this was a very transformative few years I was going through, and a lot of stuff was happening. But because it doesn't really happen to me anymore. But at the time, I'd actually had, I don't know if we want to go into this too, but it had some very negative. So anyway, this gathering was just I'd gotten really good at working with the negative energies. I found I didn't have any fear, and I just had a lot of love and compassion for them, because they also have just forgotten who they are,
Yeah.
and are actually, everything is love and light. It's just that we fall into forgetfulness.
Mm.
So I loved working with them to help them remember who they really were also. But I had to do a lot of it at this gathering. There were a lot of crazy energies. And um, soon in, I had met someone who said, the person who was Judas is here at this gathering. And I was like, okay, well, didn't know who it was, but just kind of went along. This gathering lasted for 8 days. We were all there together. So I'm trying to remember when it started, but the person who actually turned out to be my roommate, she started to, and she was this lovely, lovely person. And at one point, she came forward. She was really scared. She told me, there's something I have to do at this gathering, and I'm really scared to do it. And she didn't tell me anything more. But she came forward and she said, I'm the person who was Judas. But what was so interesting was when she did that, she said it to the whole group. Her voice changed. It was like she was a completely different person. Her voice dropped like an octave.
Mm.
It was and it came out very powerfully. Usually she's very soft spoken. And and she, it was just really very, very, very emotional. And then she had another incident that I wasn't present for, where she actually had a memory of being strangled, of being hung, having the rope around her neck. So she was going through so much during this week also, coming, these past life memories were kind of intruding themselves on her. Anyway, on the last morning, we both were up early, and we were just talking about everything that happened, and I had been sharing with her my past life experiences from that lifetime. And she said to me, and I said to her, back when Yeshua was alive and we were all together, that's as far as I got in the sentence. And she'd been sitting up in bed and she just fell backwards, and she was just Judas again. And she could see Yeshua above her, and they were talking to each other. And he was basically telling her, you never did anything wrong. Everything's perfect. I love you. And but she was very emotional and crying. And since I was there, I went over and I held her hand and I tried to kind of, help her through it. And she turned and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, I know you." And I said, "Well, I was Simon at that time." And she said, "No, no, Isabella." And I said, "Well, who were you?" And she said, "Mary." She said, "Mary and Isabella." And she was so happy and joyous about it. And I just kind of didn't know what to make of that. She said a lot of other things. It was really quite incredible, quite incredible. But basically, what she just kept saying was, "There's naught but love.
Hmm.
There's naught but love." And that was the message she wanted everyone to know, that that love, that there's only love. And the forgiveness of Judas is a really important thing
Yeah.
to have
It's the
happen.
same message again. If we go into past lives or lives between lives, or talk to ascended masters, it's again the same message. And sometimes it feels cliche and overdone, but again, if you just understand it, and there's a reason why it's being repeated, for it to be normalized. Yeah.
Yeah. And also to be applied,
Yeah.
because you can say that, but then when you think, yeah, there's nothing but love, except this one little thing I don't think is good, right? Or this one little thing I know is wrong,
Hmm.
right? It's like, no, it's really has to apply to everything. Like that's the challenge, to really believe
Yeah.
that even when, things that are not comfortable and don't necessarily feel good are happening, to continue that faith that it really only love is real. It's only love. So what happened for me then things got interesting. So I was talking to this woman in Ireland, on Zoom, who channels Mother Mary. And was telling her about, for some reason, this was soon after all this happened, I was telling her about everything that happened, including that conversation I had with Judas. And she said, and when I said Isabella, she said, "Oh, that's Elizabeth. That's Mary's cousin, Elizabeth, the
Hmm.
mother of John the Baptist." So about a year later, I think, my son, who this was also, I think, probably the incident that first got me interested rather in past lives, was my dad was murdered when I was 16.
Mhm.
And when my son was 5, I took him to my father's grave, which wasn't near where we lived, but we had taken a trip, and I was able to take him there. And as we were walking away from the grave, my son looked up at me and said, "I'm your father, come back to be with you."
Oh.
Yeah. So that was pretty crazy. And after that, he started having a few idiosyncrasies that were like my father's. It was like visiting the grave had kind of reactivated some things.
How old
So, like,
was he when you said that? How old was he?
he was 5 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah. So now, fast forward back to me finding out about Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. And my son was visiting me, and he had been exploring his past lives in those intervening years also. And he said, "Mom, I have a really strong memory of he remembered being my father, and was able to tell me details of things that I had never told him about my dad's life. Like having a German Shepherd dog,
Mhm.
that kind of thing, which was true, but that I had never told him." But he said, I have a very distinct memory of being John the Baptist and having my head chopped off.
Mm.
So this to me is very interesting because I have stayed very good friends with the person who was Judas, who and is basically having to deal with self-hate and self-judgment, right? Because that's being put on her all the time
Mm.
by everybody who uses Judas as the example of the person who's the worst betrayer and the most evil person there ever was and all this stuff. But John the Baptist, he was killed because he was standing up and saying, I don't know if you know the story, but Herod had married the wife of his brother after his brother died.
Mm.
And John thought that was wrong. And he was always speaking out against it and saying he shouldn't have married his brother's wife. And so finally, basically, the wife asked for him to be beheaded, to be killed.
Mm.
But that's an example of judgment against others,
Yeah.
right? And now the interesting thing was that my father had the reason he had gotten killed was because he really didn't like the Hells Angels. And he started a fight. He happened to be at a bar that was next door to the Hells Angels headquarters, or right near the Hells Angels headquarters in New York City. And he went and threw a rock through or kicked in their window, broke their window.
Mm.
They came out and murdered him. But he did that. He was very drunk and he was bipolar.
Mm.
And so he wasn't in his right mind when he did it. But to me, it's a very interesting parallel with the John the Baptist story, right? Of being killed for speaking out against someone who you thought was wrong, right?
Mm. Exactly.
So, and my son is also bipolar. He's actually much sicker and he's been over these years, he's been getting progressively sicker. But he's very, very judgmental and very angry against the world. So, to me, these are both examples of not being able to apply that principle that everything is love. Because when you're standing in judgment against people, right? And you suffer. Who suffers the most when you're in judgment, either against yourself or against others? It doesn't matter.
Mm.
You're going to suffer either way. There's so much suffering, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really the lesson. And this is the lesson of the Course in Miracles, which a lot of people do, but fail to learn that one lesson. It's a one simple, simple lesson is that to release judgment,
Mm.
right? And it's being humble. You have to have humility to say, I don't know what's right and what's wrong, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been very interesting. So I got this guidance to go traveling right before COVID. I went to the Middle East and I just had this feeling like I really wanted to go to Alexandria. And I went to downtown Alexandria and I stayed at overnight in a hotel overlooking the harbor where our breakfast was served on the roof overlooking the harbor. When I got up there for breakfast, I looked out and I just had this thought, oh, this is where we came in. And I thought, oh, what does that mean? Because I had flown in on a plane, But then I found the location of the synagogue that had been there and for thousands of years. And it had just reopened. It had been closed for like a year for renovation. It had just reopened. I went in, I was the only person there. They'd revealed the old stone entranceway, I guess. There was in the center that it was
Mm.
built around with these ancient stones from all that time ago. And when I got in there, I just had this memory just came flooding back to me. So I wasn't doing a regression, but I just was absolutely overwhelmed with it. And I saw that my mother had brought me there and then left me.
Mm.
I was 7 years old. And it was a good thing there was nobody else there because I just sat there and cried my little heart out. I was just crying and crying and crying, reliving that experience. And then later on, I went out to there's a temple, an Osiris temple, um, who's the husband of Isis. And
Mm.
the Isis cult, we think perhaps was the oldest, most continuous roots. But I think that what I got was that at that time, I had been in a scene in Israel, and my mother had brought me to do training at this temple in the ISIS tradition.
Mm.
So, and I guess it was very common, but for some reason she left me there. And I believe that Mother Mary then came later. She was younger than me, but she came and she was my cousin. So she and I knew each other very well and had lots of memories of being with her that were very, very happy.
Mm.
But and a lot of these other memories came back to me when I went and I visited this temple, which was also very interesting because there was nobody there when I was there. Like
Yeah.
there were no guards, there was zero people. I just had wandered around it by myself. But I had all these memories coming back, and then when I was there, I had brought my computer and I just started doing writing channeling, where I just hear one word and write it down and I don't know where it's going. So John the Baptist had, the other famous story about him was that he had baptized Jesus. That's why he's called John the First Baptist.
Mm.
He started doing this practice. It was an Essene practice. It's like a ritual cleansing, but it had always only been done within the Essene community. And he was the first person to bring it out to the public, sort of to the greater world. Okay, that was it. Bethany. So I was told to go to Jerusalem and I was told to go to Bethany. And I had no idea where Bethany was. Well, it turns out, so then I went and looked it up when I got home. And it's a place on the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist.
Mm.
It's in Jordan. You can visit the other side of the river in Israel, but to go to the actual spot, and they think they're the caves where John was living also. It's in the country of Jordan. So on my journeys, I went, made sure that I stopped there, and you could only go to it on a guided tour.
Mm.
So this tour, I was in a small group and a tour guide, and we were walking along. And when we got there, the same thing happened to me. I just broke down. I just started sobbing. And it was really interesting because I felt like I could feel that life of John the Baptist, but I also felt like I could feel my father's life and my son's life.
Mm.
And it's just all so tragic. It's the same tragedy kind of being repeated over and over again. And I just was crying my little eyes out again, but this time I was in front of people. So then the guide came over to me towards the end, and he said, "You must be very religious." And I said, yes, that's it. I am very religious. So he wouldn't think I was just nuts. But he said then we hadn't been allowed to go down and touch the water of the place where the baptism occurred. He said, "Go ahead, you can go down," since I was so religious. So that was really nice. And then I had one more occurrence like that on that trip when I was in Jerusalem. I went to I believe it's called El Einheim. It's a suburb now outside of Jerusalem, but it was a small village. It's a really, really nice place. But that's where John the Baptist grew up. That's where there's a local legend there about him, an angel coming and helping to hide him during the purge of the innocents. So you know about this, that when Herod found out that when the three wise men told him that this new king of the Jews had been born,
Mm.
he had all the babies killed who had been born that year. And John is just 6 months older than Jeshua. So Jeshua and Mary and Joseph had fled to Egypt. And I'd actually seen the home that they'd stayed in old Cairo. Is at least there's a story there that this is the house that they had lived in then. Um, but I hadn't felt anything when I saw that house. But when I went to the place where John had lived, I felt the same thing. I just was overcome. And luckily there was nobody else there. So that's sort of like the two biggest healings in my life for those two lifetimes. The two biggest challenges, people that I've loved very much that I've had to just give their freedom to, and just hold that idea that everything's going to be okay and that the The healing is ongoing. I believe that it's sort of a collective process. But if anybody wants to take anything away from this, what I would say is when we project onto Judas that he's terrible, and when we project onto John that he was righteous,
Hmm.
you know, we're falling into that same error of not remembering that all is one and everything is love. And so we
Yeah.
can just remind ourselves when you find yourself judging yourself or judging other people, if you can just remind yourself, you know, you're choosing to harm yourself and the world when you do
Yeah.
that.
And something that comes to my mind is two things. So first thing is that even in Hindu culture, there is this story about like Lord Rama. So Lord Ram, he had to kill Ravan. So Ravan was the evil one, basically. Although
Right.
he was also a very, very learned person, and he had done such penance that he had gotten what do you call as boons from the gods, and but he turned to the evil side and he abducted Lord Ram's wife, goddess Sita, right? So there's this whole story about good versus evil. And today we celebrate Diwali as a festival of, good winning over evil. And during Dashera, which is like the 10th day after a particular date, and Dashera means the 10th day. So
Yeah.
that's the day when he was killed. So people celebrate that by burning his effigy, and they, recently some people have come forward and said that we should stop doing that because we are placing so much judgment over him, when ultimately it is also written in the scriptures that it was all a big plan to teach us a few things, right? So Lord Ram had to take birth as a human being and go through all those difficult times, his wife being abducted, and searching her, and then gathering an army and then killing that evil person. And then Ravan also had to choose to be that evil person, when in reality he was the happiest. He wanted to do that because he wanted to be the person to be able to play that role and to be killed by such a great god. And ultimately it was all a play. So
Right.
when we are
That would be
projecting
a
this,
great role to
yeah.
land. Yeah.
So when we are like, we can take the learning from it, but when we are burning the effigy, we're celebrating his death. We are, people sometimes even do other things to, cast their judgment on Ravan, use him as a, an idiom or a phrase, as a depiction of evil. So it has been observed, even I've observed that whenever there is Dashera celebrations, something really bad happens immediately after the celebration. So that's what I've seen. Like the effigy falls on people, like it's a giant effigy, you know, could be like 5 stories, 6 stories, or even bigger. And sometimes it falls on people. There is fire. Sometimes the fireworks go here and there. There was one incident where so many people were standing on train tracks and a train ran over them, and things like this happens during that celebration, and people have come forward and said that we should stop, really stop doing this, because of we are propagating the same, negative energy, and we
Yeah.
should actually be celebrating it by just lighting candles. That's what they said, celebrate good over evil by lighting diyas, oil lamps, candles, but we are doing all these other things.
Yeah. But and really, I mean, we're very caught up in good versus evil in
Yeah.
the world. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second thing that I wanted to mention was that, as you mentioned, the incident about them getting to know, a person getting to know that there's a king coming up, so he killed all the babies. So that story is similar to the story of Krishna. So because the evil person, I forgot his name, he knew that someone who is going to kill him is going to be born,
Yeah.
so on a particular day. So he went around and killed all the babies that were on that day. But
Yeah.
Krishna was exchanged with another baby. So he survived and ultimately, obviously, killed him in the end. So
Yeah.
it's like the same story going around.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, the patterns.
Yeah,
You see the same patterns over and over and over again. And that's what karma is really, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we talked last time about releasing the karma. And I think the only way to do that is just through forgiveness,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. So,
Forgiveness. By forgiveness, what I mean is, I always say it's recognizing the a priori innocence of everyone. So it means
yes,
from the beginning, you are innocent. There is only innocence.
yes.
Recognizing there's only innocence.
Yeah, so this understanding has helped me in my own life as well. Like so many people have done wrong to me in this life as a person, but when I just step back and see from a bird's eye view, I'm like, yeah, it's a contract. This happened because I had to learn the XYZ stuff. So if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have done this. So,
Right.
all of this is like a big web of contracts, is what it is.
And one way you can get yourself out of that is just by doing what you're doing, is saying,
Yeah.
what's the lesson in this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of railing against what fate is doing to you or life is doing to you or people are doing to you. You can say,
Yeah.
where's the place where I can grow through this?
Yeah. So I always say, like, in order to dissolve karma, there are a few things you can do. One is forgiveness, but some people aren't able to come to that. So the second is non-reaction. Don't react to stuff. And the third one is having the understanding that everything is one, and they are, acting out of their contracts on their ego, their level of consciousness, and then just, letting it dissolve in that way.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about your past life story.
Yeah, so my so I have always have had all these psychic and spiritual experiences during my childhood. Um, so I feel that past lives come forward in many different forms, not just images or stories. So they can also come forward as behavior, as certain tendencies, emotions, certain pattern of making choices, right?
Absolutely.
And when I was small, when I was little, maybe a toddler, I used to be very, very angry, like extremely angry at everything and everyone, and just screaming and just demanding things and stuff like that. And why is this not this way and not that way, like that? And I still remember that scene. I remember that scene visually. My mother used to go for PhD, so she was always busy. And I was living with my grandparents, and I could only see my mother in the evenings, and so I was very angry about that. So I told my grandmother, "I'll cut your head off, and I'll cut my mom's head off, and then exchange your heads. That way, mom will stay with me, and you will go to college." So, so I was that angry, and I was always talking about cutting people's head off, and that imagine a toddler, imagine a small child saying this
Yeah.
to everyone, he's angry with.
Yeah.
And just recently in 2017, when I had my first actual past life experiences in my dreams, is when I saw that I was a 41-year-old king in some time. And I was very, very anxious. Like I was completely incapable of holding that position. And I was very, very spoiled. I grew up like a completely spoiled child. And I had a brother who was elder to me. So he was the one who was supposed to be the king. So I was like, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to learn anything. So I was just, wasting my time away. And then when the time comes, something happens. I don't know what exactly. Perhaps he dies or some other political arrangement. They say you have to become the king. And I'm like, what? Like I didn't prepare for it at all.
Yeah.
And then they put me in that position against my will. And I'm just sitting there and not knowing what to do, and completely overwhelmed with responsibility. And then I thought that I could only control the population with anger. So I was angry at everything and everyone, and anyone, even if they came to me with just a small crime, theft or something, I would just order beheading. So I was beheading people left and right to instill this fear in
Wow.
everybody. And I had this gold throne that was like a swing. So it was tied to the ceiling. So it was that long. It was made of gold. And I just loved it. I was so attached to it that even when I died, I still remember that as well. Even when I died, my soul was stuck in the ceiling, in the corner of a ceiling above that throne. And I was looking down at that throne. So I was worried that people don't take it away or somebody else doesn't,
Right.
possess it.
It was
And
from moving on with your journey because you were so attached to the throne.
yeah, and I was such a stupid person in that life. Like I had no zero IQ. So I had no understanding of how to do anything. So I had this because I didn't want people to know that I was stupid. So I had this best friend who was very intelligent, who I had as a secret advisor. So that person was a normal, farmer, a peasant, you can say. So I
Yeah.
couldn't put him in a proper position as a minister or something, as an advisor, but he was a secret advisor. So he used to come to my chambers through like a secret pathway that, only me and him knew. And he used to come to my room and advise me, okay, do this and do that. That's how I used to, run the kingdom. So I was so ashamed of that, so fearful of that thing coming out. And I
Mm.
was always full of anxiety, full of fear and dread. So I had all these emotions as well all throughout my life, like anxiety, fear, dread, all of that. And again, uh, anger, a lot of anger. So, yeah. And I died, and then I was on the ceiling, and then I could just see like uncountable like sunrises, sunsets, sunrises, sunsets. So I'm just watching time passing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was incredibly lonely throughout my life as well as after. So I was just stuck there forever. And then when that best friend he dies, so his soul comes to take me, that okay, now you can come with me. So he comes
Right.
and he takes me forward from there.
Oh, good. Phew.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I saw that as the first life that I saw in my
Very.
dreams. Yeah.
So now, once you saw that, did that affect your feelings? Do you feel like you got relief from the anxiety and dread?
Yeah, so when that happened immediately after when my grandfather passed away. He was very, very dear to me. His soul visited me. That prompted this spiritual evolution, this past life recollections.
Yeah.
So I was in this emotional turmoil at that time. So immediately I didn't see much difference, but yeah, later on, 6 months and down the line, I do see that anger disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have. Before I was just angry all the time, but now it's not there. Now it's not like that.
Right.
So yeah, and anxiety as well. I saw a huge difference. So later on, I also learned Reiki, which also helped with my anxiety, but past life that helped, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
lift a big chunk of it, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
And then right after I saw this life, I saw other people's lives as well from different angles. So I saw myself as that best friend who used to come and advise the king.
Yeah.
And then I saw myself as the daughter of that best friend. So as a payback, I sent his daughter for studying outside of the kingdom, because if I allow her to study in my kingdom, everybody would know. So I
Right.
sent his daughter outside to study.
Yeah.
But because I was so cruel to the public and everything, she came back to the kingdom to take me down, to join the rebellion against me. So
Yeah.
then I saw the life as that daughter. I was that daughter, and I was rebelling against that king. And
Yeah.
then they killed me, and I fell from like a very high wall. And I actually felt the whole thing, felt that
Yeah.
whole death.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then one or two more people were involved, and I saw their lives as well. So I don't know why I was shown all of these lives from different angles. No, I don't know. Probably it was the same soul split into different people. I don't know.
maybe. Or this, yeah, soul group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, I don't think it's a linear one-on-one thing. So maybe even it was a soul group that's now coming together in your current self,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, could be because I don't have those people in my life as separate people. So I
Yeah,
was all those people.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
could be that. Yeah, so then that whole group was shown to me in one time, like within a few weeks, I would say.
yeah,
And then after that, the next past life I saw was so I didn't get to practice past life regression immediately after I learned it because there was this huge chaos in my life that had started happening because
yes,
probably my vibrational frequency was raised all of a sudden. And then because my whole family, everyone I ever knew, the place where I was living at, my career, nothing resonated with it. Everything was taken away. So
yeah,
I was plunged into this chaos. So it took me 2 years after that to get settled. So I wasn't able to practice during that time. And after 2 years, I started, not having that confidence to start practicing. So I just asked the universe, my guides, that, okay, I really want to start practicing. So please help me with that. And I was meditating. And immediately after that meditation, I felt like I want to go lie down on the bed. I thought I had to sleep, but as soon as I closed my eyes, I was in another person's body and I was looking at a guy standing like right in front of my face and
yeah,
smiling wide, like it was a wide smile. And I got so scared that I opened my eyes. I was like, okay, what was this?
yeah.
So I got like really surprised by that. So then I was like, okay, this is the past life, actual past life regression I'm having. So this was the very first time that I had an actual visual past life regression. Before that, it was only in my dreams, and
Right.
during the training, it was only the emotions that I got. So this was
Oh,
the first time. Yeah.
okay.
So that is again a very interesting one. Um, so I went back in. I said, okay, I want to go back in. I again closed my eyes, and I saw that I was in the body of a guy. I was very tall, probably, you know, uh, 8 feet, very tall. So everyone was tall in that lifetime. And this guy was standing right in front of me, and he was my best friend. And we were in a vehicle, in like a bus, and there were seats on the left and right. There was a driver in the front, and then there were two females in the back. And both of us were wearing like a white robe kind of thing and white headgear, like people in um like Arab people wear, so in the same way. And the
Yeah,
ladies, they were wearing something like a sari, but it was not actually a sari. So it was like there were layers that were meeting in the middle like this, and there was like a lot of gold within the fabric. So it was like sewn into the fabric. So they were also wearing a lot of gold, and there were two females. So then I again came out of that after watching that scene. I was like, okay, this is interesting.
yeah,
So I was basically conducting a regression session on myself. So I was going in and then coming out with information and then going in with the question and
yeah,
then again, doing that.
yeah,
So I said, okay, I want to see what's happening in this situation. So I go back in again and I ask my best friend, what's her name? There was a lady on the window seat. I was really interested in her, and she looked somewhat like my husband, soul wise. She felt like
yeah,
my husband in
yeah,
today's life.
yeah.
I asked him like, who is she? And I felt really stupid while asking that question because in that lifetime I already know who she is.
Right,
So
right.
I was like, this is gonna sound so stupid, but who's she? Who is she? So he told me like her name is Clue, so CLU. So that's what I call my husband now. I don't know why I call him that. It makes no sense.
Okay.
So he says she's Clue. Like, do you already know her? I said okay. And then like there's this exchange happening. We are just teasing each other, and then fast forward, I look around. I see that it's like a tropical weather. I can smell the tropical air. It's hot and it's humid, and I see like palm trees and sand, beaches, and then on the left side there is like a huge mountain with huge statues carved on the mountain. So it was it was very very big. So the scale of it was very big.
Yeah.
And then like on the sea I could see some ships, but they don't look like the ships that we have today. They are egg shaped, so they are closed, and they have like little windows, and everything is just very very intricate. So everything is designed very very like artistically, and intricate designs with gold highlights. So
Okay.
gold is like their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see that and I'm like, I don't know of any cultures or any time when this was happening. So I asked, like, when is this? When was this? So then I get my own voice in my ears shouting, Lemurian, 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 like three
Ah,
times I shout. And at that time, I didn't know what this word is. I didn't know what Lemuria is.
isn't that interesting? Isn't
Yeah,
that interesting? Yeah.
yeah, I had heard about Atlantis at that time. I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about Lemuria. And I heard this word and I came out and I wrote it down in my phone, in my phone notes. And then
Yeah.
I went back again and I saw that people were equal, everybody was equal, and it was like a very positive society, and everybody spoke the truth, and everybody was paid equal no matter what their work was. And I was a construction person, so I used to make the tracks for that bus train kind of thing that we were in. So I could see that I was working on the tracks, but there were no tools. So how was I working? I don't know. So yeah, I was standing in like knee deep dirt digging up the earth. And then I see the houses. So all the houses were like open from the front. So even the first floor was open from the front, no
Yeah.
balconies. The first rooms were open, and anybody could come in and go to anybody's house, only the front rooms. And then there were like the back side of the house that was more private. So it was like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I saw like people were very rich, and the clothing that I saw on those women, that was like normal everyday clothing. It wasn't something festive. Yeah, so I it was completely unbelievable. So right after I came out of it, I immediately Googled what is Lemuria. It wasn't even Lemuria, it was Lemurian. So I Googled what is Lemurian, and then I came to know all about it. And it was still unbelievable. And I tried to research, but I had this like a block to understanding it, to believing it. So I said, no, it can't be real. No, this can't be real. So
Yeah.
I let it be for that time. But that same evening, I hadn't even advertised it, but that same evening, I got a phone call from my first past life regression client. So that was it. That needed to be brought forward to show me that you're not just this small little girl and who is having this huge imposter syndrome, that you have this um, you know, if they say that it was like 100,000 years ago, then you have that many years of experience, and
Mhm.
you were someone at that time, right? And so it's okay, like you can own that ability, you can own your training that you had, and you can actually do it. So I got the confidence to do it from there, and it hasn't stopped since then. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think a lot of what we're shown is not just random, an interesting story. It's what we need to remember now in order to do what we came here to do. Yeah.
Yeah, actually. So that was the second time that I had like a huge past life experience. And after that, I didn't have many like big past life recollections, but only like small ones here and there. So one I had was that I was in Ireland somewhere, and I was like a high school girl, and I liked a boy who was Indian, and we were doing all the teenage stuff in school, and I was getting bullied for that. They were making fun of me for liking an Indian boy, so that was happening. Just
Mhm.
that snippet. And then I saw that um, I was in some like a war situation. So there were like bombs falling upon us, and there was military everywhere, and I was probably an orphan. I didn't see my parents anywhere. I didn't know where my parents were. So I was with other kids, and we decided to hide in the sewers, so in the sewage pipes. So we went down the manholes, and then we stayed there for months and months, and
Mm.
there were rats everywhere, and I could see like there were two other boys sitting in front of me, and one of them was my husband in this life, and the other
Mm.
one was another best friend that I have. So I could see two of them sitting with me there in the sewers, and you
Yeah.
know and then I remember coming out after a few months, and then that light hitting us, and it was really, really, bright outside.
Wow.
So yeah, I remember that. And yeah, so these were the two ones, major ones, that I saw again. Then another one I remember is, it's not very clear, so it's just like a fleeting thing. So I see that again, like I was very, very poor, very, very like poverty stricken. So I have had many lives in very like deep poverty, and I have also like have had that emotion, that feeling, the residual from that in this life, in a way that um like I never felt like I deserved anything new. So even though my parents were rich, I never asked for new clothes, and I kept repeating the same clothes even though they were torn, and I didn't tell them that my shoes were broken or anything like that. I just kept wearing the old clothes, and when I had to buy something new, like a laptop or something, I felt so guilty to ask, you know. And I
Yeah.
just felt like, that money is not mine, so I should not be asking anything. So, and people, when they looked at me, they thought that I'm from a poor family. And when they came to know that I'm not, like they were shocked. They were worried that why is this so, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, and then that took some time for me to, come out of, right?
Well,
So
what do you think? How did you come out of that? You think seeing
um
past lives where you were so poor, really were so poor?
yeah, so the seeing those lives also like brought awareness that okay, it's not, first of all, I wasn't even aware that I was doing that. So
Mhm.
yeah, so only when I heard some people tell me, and then seeing these lives that I pointed out those patterns, and then I consciously like made changes, consciously allowed myself to buy new things, ask for things from my parents, and just try to look at other people, how they dress, and then try to see what kind of style do I like, and then try those clothes. So I had to really like consciously
Yeah.
consciously do things in order to overcome that. So
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I should probably share is that my most immediate past life was actually my first big healing, one of my first one of the biggest healings in my life, and it did come before the other things that I've talked about. And that was I was using something called the emotion code. Have I
mm,
did I talk to you about the emotion code before?
yeah, we talked about that in the previous
And
discussion.
did I say, yeah. So what I uncovered was that I was getting the way you do it there is you identify the emotion in a grid of they have like, I don't know, 100 different emotions. So it's very specific. And then you ask for the origin of it. And I kept getting that it was before I was born. So I
Mm,
thought, oh, was it my most immediate past life? And I got yes. And they were all coming from when I was 6, 7, and 8 during my most immediate past life. And then the memory started flooding back that I was sexually molested by my father in that
Mm,
lifetime. And I had seen before that I was a Russian ballerina. I had already seen that that's what I was in my last life. And I had a lot of those things when I was a child. I liked to listen to Russian music. I liked to ice skate. And I had a muff that was like my prized possession,
mm,
like a warm hand warmer that you put in. It
mm,
was a very weird thing for somebody to have was a muff. But so I definitely think when I was young, I was in touch with that. Um, but and then when I was 7 in this lifetime, I was sent to a sleepaway camp for
mm,
just 2 weeks, I think. And I cried the whole time. I was unconsolable and I couldn't stop crying. It was the weirdest thing. When I went back and I saw, and then the other thing that happened was when I was in my 20s and I was doing therapy, my therapist said, you were sexually molested by your father. And I
mm,
said, no, I really wasn't. She said, everything in the way you are is like someone who was sexually molested.
mm,
So, I was very kind of, and when I work with clients who have had that experience, I always say that the biggest damage comes from that because when that happens to you as a child, you think that your value lies in your sexuality.
mm,
So it's in your being sexually attractive to people desiring you and having the sexual relationships is where
mm,
all your value comes from. And that was what I was like when I was in my 20s. And
mm,
didn't really completely heal. It was kind of tied into that thinking that love comes from other people thing, but it didn't really heal till I had this journey with the emotion code. Um, but it was a lot of, it was I had to spend a lot of time with that child telling her this wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You know, it
mm,
was adults who should have known better. Just like you would tell someone you're counseling now. I had to go
mm,
back and really work with that child. Um, and then when I was 8, I was in that lifetime, I was sent away and I never saw either of my parents again. So I
mm.
don't know why. I was sent away to ballet school, but I think it's because my mother found out about us and just wanted me to not be there. But I think maybe something then happened to my parents, but I never saw either one of them again. So that was why I had that trauma when I was sent to camp around the same age
Mm,
in this lifetime. It's very interesting. But I definitely feel that once I had done that healing, I felt like a different person in a lot of
mm.
ways. Yeah, I just felt like I'd really released
Yeah,
that trauma. And I think it's so interesting that my therapist was able to pick up on it, even though it was from a past life.
yeah,
It wasn't now, but I had carried it over from this past life.
yeah. She must have been intuitive.
Yeah, she was very intuitive. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, we all are. We don't realize.
Yeah. We let ourselves be. Yeah.
Yeah,
When,
yeah. One more thing was coming up is that, I always had this feeling that my parents have abandoned me, like all my childhood, even though
yeah.
there was obviously problems in my present life as well, like there was emotional neglect and all that. But
Yeah.
like I had this very heavy feeling that they have physically abandoned me, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen that past life, so I'm not sure. But I even wrote a story about a girl who was abandoned by her parents, like that. Wrote that story. So, but then that happened later on in my life. So,
Oh,
there was like this huge betrayal from my parents. But
yeah.
it could be a pattern that has, happened before and then repeated now as well. And then another thing was that, I have always had this huge blockage from my throat up, so my throat chakra and up. So I was, always quiet. My self-expression was completely blocked off. I did not speak. I did not want to, create or anything. So um, when I started working on myself and, started doing all these practices in
Yeah.
order to open that, and it took a few years. I think this happened last year because I've been practicing Reiki, past life, psychic readings, all these things from the last 5, 6 years. So,
Yeah.
but this happened only last year after all that healing, is
Yeah.
that my throat chakra actually started opening up. Basically, my self expression started opening up. And
Yeah.
there was one day when out of nowhere. I don't like, I like singing. I used to sing when I was a child as well, but I hadn't done that forever now.
Yeah.
But there was one day when suddenly I just felt like I just want to sing the whole day. So I was singing the whole day, that day. And then immediately, like that night, I had a dream where I was standing on like a edge of a cliff, and I was wearing like a skirt and feathers and native dress, and then I was throat singing into the mountains,
Wow.
and it was so beautiful. And when I woke up, it was still there. Like I was still doing it when I woke up, and I could feel that when I was in that body, I could feel my vocal cords like moving in that way, because it's a very specific way
Yeah.
the vocal cords move in that type of singing.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it was Mongolian or whether it was Native American, but all of these cultures have this throat singing.
Yeah.
So then I went on to YouTube and I searched for different songs of throat singing, and I did find that one that I was singing, that particular
Wow.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's
So that
amazing.
that was, yeah. So
Yeah.
basically my throat chakra was completely open in that life. So when
Yeah.
it opened in this life, I saw that. So that was like,
That's so wonderful. Well, the world's a better place for your throat chakra being open.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's when I actually started posting a lot of content, and I started this podcast. And before, like, I wasn't able to get myself to do all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a wonder can be a wonderful part of your healing journey. I don't believe that it's necessary, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that for people who I think whatever is going to be useful for you is what comes to you.
Yes.
I don't think
Yes.
well, I mean, I hope if someone's watching this and they sometimes I don't want people to feel like, oh well, why haven't I had these past life experiences? Why don't know I know about my past life? Because everything that needs to be healed is present in your current life. Like you don't
Mm.
need to have the past life to heal it. It's there to be done. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But and just trust that the teachers, the methods, the experiences that are necessary for your particular journey are going to come to you. I think that's a lesson we've both learned is that they come at the right time when we need them, the right thing has come. So whether it's past life or some other form, just
Yeah.
trust that'll come. I believe that's happening for everyone.
Yeah. I've had clients as well who come for past life regression, but then they see, perhaps sometimes they don't see anything, but then when they go home, something else happens.
Yeah.
Just going into that deep meditative state has, shifted something in them. So
Mhm.
that was necessary for them.
Yeah.
Or perhaps they see some ascended master or a god they worship or someone, and then get to talk to them and get their answers.
Yeah.
So sometimes I've even seen like people just see shapes, triangles, octagons, and stuff like that. And then they go home and they say, "Though I just got this, intuitive message." So,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be past lives. It could
Right.
be
Right.
anything.
Yeah. But it's been very interesting hearing about yours.
Yeah, same here. I have never heard someone describe their past life in that time, in the time of Jesus, like in such a great detail. So that was very interesting.
Was interesting for me too. I think it was very interesting to have be guided to go to a location and then
Hmm.
have the memories hit me at the location. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a classic. Like when we watch, I don't know about Hollywood, but there are a lot of movies on reincarnation in India. So uh, this is the classic trope. The hero, the actor goes to a particular location and gets flashbacks.
Flashbacks. Yep. That's interesting. I didn't even know that. That's funny. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. It's been lovely talking to you again.
yeah,
Thank
same here. Thank you everyone for watching these two episodes, and I hope you take away something that helps you in your life. And past life regression is a wonderful, wonderful modality. If you feel called to it, then definitely reach out to either one of us for booking your sessions. And we will perhaps do another episode soon in the future. Uh, yeah, so see you again sometime.
Thank you, Ria.
Thank you.